Hello everyone, my name is Megan Bott. I'm with the New Mexico Black Leadership Council and the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative. Welcome to Our Lives Matter, a roundtable discussion that we bring to you to address the ways that we can go beyond the vote to address critical issues facing the Black community today. This will be an interactive discussion open to public questions, so any questions or comments that you have, do not hesitate to drop in the comments section. With us we have today Sean Cardinalli, founder of Truth for Power New Mexico, Mason Graham, with the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative, who will also be moderating your questions and comments that we will take some time to address. LaQuante Berry, founder of Black New Mexico Movement, as well as Torrance and Barbara Jordan, also from the Black New Mexico Movement, Kindra from the New Mexico Black Leadership Council, and Sydney Teo, the Associate Director at Common Cause New Mexico. Before we begin, Barbara, I know that you guys have an event coming up on Saturday. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So we're having an event that we call Peace Talks. It's going to be this Saturday, October 3rd, starting at 6 p.m. And we're encouraging everyone to come out. It is our last effort to get voters registered, to get people registered to vote. And we'll also have a plethora of motivational speakers just to let you know why it is important, why our vote is important, and why it's more important now more than ever. So we're hoping that everyone can come out to that. Thank you, Nick.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that. So to begin, I just want to say we all know that we really need to get out the vote. So what can we do beyond voting to address the injustices in the Black community? And we will begin by recognizing the tragedy that brings us here today, which is the horrible killing of Breonna Taylor. And I want to start with the Black New Mexico movement because you guys have been doing a lot to address this injustice. So tell us a little bit about how we can address this in a way that we make sure that this doesn't happen again, where justice is not served, and we can prevent these kind of tragedies from taking place in the future.
Yes, that's a very difficult question for us because we're literally being hunted at this time. And the tragic loss of our Queen Breonna Taylor is just another example of that. So what I would say is that if you can't get out in the streets, then we need to get in your local and state government so that we can make some changes. We have to demand, sustain, and effective changes so that we can prevent this from happening again. Like, we cannot lose anyone else to injustice. We did not have any justice for Breonna, like it wasn't even presented to the table. So we have to get out there, we have to make noise, and you also have to email, call your local and state representatives and get involved.
Great. And it's also brought up the discussion of defunding the police. And when people hear defunding the police, they think it means less safety for citizens in the community. How do we address that? What does it mean to defund the police? And how do we respond to people who think that we're sacrificing people's safety? Sean, we'll start with
you. Thanks for the question. I just read a little thing on the Brookings Institution website, which says defund the police means, reallocating or redirecting funding away from the police department to other government agencies, which seems pretty simple. But I think the problem for me, and I've spoken on this before, was that defund almost immediately brings a backlash. I mean, I wish we were saying something like reallocate, or we were thinking in less, scarcity terms. The fact is our politics in general, whether it's for police or for education or for healthcare, or for veterans affairs, all of these services seem to be underfunded. So I don't want to give less. I don't want it to make it seem like we're giving less to the police. I mean, we can't even keep police on the force in Albuquerque because they often go to other cities, other markets, because the pay isn't good. So I want to be sure that we have the correct police, that we have worthy police, that we have educated and acculturated police who know their communities, know the people within them, and really have an investment in the people they are serving. They serve us. So we can keep saying defund. I'm not even going to get into abolish, but you do have cities like Camden and I think Minneapolis now who are sort of starting over from scratch. That's great if you can do it, but that's not abolish. Again, it's starting over and it's building better, not just taking away. Because I think we're already scrapping for, we're already grabbing for scraps on the table. So I just want to sort of clarify how I'm trying to understand it and how I hope we don't get more backlash just for the wording when the idea and the intent is actually very powerful and working.
Okay, I see you nodding your head. You want to comment on that?
So my take, I think the way that we look at it as Black Mexico movement is, we use the word reform. We say reform because, to be honest, we're not about the abolish, like Sean kind of say, just getting rid of. Because when you get rid of, it's like, what are you going to do after that? So how we look at it is the system has worked for 400 years for everyone else. So why can't we fix the system for it to work for people of color as well, or minorities, I should say. So that's kind of how I look at it, is that you have to, I kind of say that we all are saying the same thing when it comes to the refund, defund, abolish. I think people who say abolish, they're a little bit more strong on it, because I really feel like they really want to just get rid of police. But again, I look at it, once you get rid of police, what are you going to do after that? So I think that we can go on and we can fix the system that we already have and get that system to work for everyone. And then while we're doing that as well, we can figure out what can we do with some of these funds that they're using, like military-grade weapons. Let's put that into the education system. Or like Sean was saying, we can't keep officers and they go other places and they receive more pay. How can we up the pay for those officers to make them want to stay here in Albuquerque or New Mexico? How can we clean up the homeless? How can we make better jobs, make people want to open up businesses here in Albuquerque or New Mexico? I think that is where kind of we play a part when we talk about reform and everything, is ultimately we're all trying to get to the same place. We're just using different words. And like Sean said, when you start using different words, you start getting backlash. People start looking at things differently and funny. So I think we do have to watch what words we are using. And if we do use those words, you got to kind of have yourself ready to back those things up.
Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to echo everything that everyone's saying on here. And, we have to remember that the system is operating the way that it was built. So justice was not given to Breonna Taylor. It's built to not give justice to our Black and brown community. And, it's very difficult to try to message the nuances between defunding or reforming. I mean, like Tay said, we're all talking about the same thing. We're talking about diverting sources to other measures in order to, have safer communities that are free from violence, and to have accountability measures in place for these things when they happen. That's all I wanted to add.
So next we want to address the issue of transparency in our judicial system. So here's the deal. We know that Black Americans get the worst of the judicial system when it comes to the judges. So we deserve the utmost transparency in electing these judges. And that simply does not seem to exist. Yet, Black people are 12 times more likely to be convicted of drug crimes than white people, even though the rate of drug use is virtually the same. So how can we start a dialogue to increase transparency in the election of these judges?
I don't know if it's the dialogue that needs to be started. What happens is in our homes, we need to teach our children. We start there with it's okay to be cops, judges, and not just lawyers. We have to be represented on both sides of the bench, behind the bench and in front of the bench, because we're the ones that are always being paid for that. So making our kids comfortable with the idea of it's okay to be a cop. It doesn't necessarily make you a pig every time. If you're a cop and you're policing your neighborhood, you can be more effective and do more than the guy who lives across town. And same thing for looking to be a judge, being public defenders, making their way up, district attorneys, taking on to those positions that normally you don't hear about in our homes and those conversations. It's always either you're going to be a lawyer, be a defense lawyer, or entertainment lawyer. It's never be a lawyer to go on the other side and represent.
That's a good point. And I know Common Cause has been doing some to address this thing. Did you want to mention that?
Yeah, so I think part of that dialogue we're talking about is also just recognizing the lack of voter education that goes into the judicial system when we are electing our judges. So we have a hybrid judicial model in New Mexico, which means that while we have a nominating commission that is appointing people to fill vacancies, we also have partisan judicial races. So, it's very difficult when you are going to go vote already and you don't have enough information in order to make, informed decisions about who's electing you in office. But overwhelmingly, most people do not know who is in their courtroom and what judges are representing them from every level, not just from the top at the Supreme Court level, but to the very bottom in your metropolitan court level and your district court level. And, part of that also feeds into, like, how do we even know information about how we retain or we don't retain and who we elect to be sitting on the bench? Now, we have something called the Judicial Performance Evaluation Commission in New Mexico, but they only evaluate judges on their actual performance while sitting on the bench. And they only evaluate retention judges. So that means that we're kind of left up to this Performance Evaluation Commission where, it's appointed by members of the legislature and by the governor. So there is a lack of representation of the community on these commissions. But also, you're at the whims of this commission providing you information on who to retain and also, your friends that you might know who might be attorneys. I know every time there's an election coming up, I have no idea who I'm going to vote to retain or not. I'm calling all of my friends that I think might know and might be able to give me the answer and, relying on just, word of mouth in order to know who should be representing us in the courtroom.
And I'd like to just jump in here. I totally agree with everything that's being said here. But I think the most troubling part is that when it comes to electing these types of officials who are going to be overseeing our well-being when it comes to the judicial side, for young African Americans, I don't think that as many of us realize that we could be on the other side. As often as it happens, we see it happen in the news. We've had it happen to loved ones, but when it happens to you in your hometown and you don't use your right to vote, you don't educate yourself about who it is on the bench, then it allows for these things to continue to happen. And much like what Torrance was saying about there's not a lot of police officers or even first responders who are black or a person of color. I think here in New Mexico, it's as low as 1% is like a black person or a person of color or even a woman who's on the force. And so with that, I think it's less of like, I don't want to be seen as that, but it's more like, they're not being educated on how being in that position or at least having a say in that position will effectively affect you. I know right here in my own community, I live right off of Unser, and there's a sheriff here, and he's actually a black guy, and I see him every other day on my walk, and he's super nice and he's super friendly. Now, when I see him as opposed to when I see other police officers is a little bit different. And I've, seen judges or stuff, but I've never been the one on the stand. But from what I've seen in the courtroom, I know when it is someone who looks like me, that it's an entirely different demeanor that they take with someone who looks like me as opposed to somebody that might not look like me. And I know that it's almost common, that is almost common knowledge, but to bring about the change is the hardest part. And so with what Sydney was saying, how now there's tools out there to learn just a little bit more about judges that we should keep and who we shouldn't keep. But I think it's all of our responsibilities to understand the inner workings of the system and exactly what areas it is that need to be changed. And maybe it's not always just the person on the stand. Maybe it's actually just a part of the law that they're following, and that could have been affected by a vote for a city councilor or a vote for a legislator that just not enough black people showed up to vote for.
We had a good question. How do we even find out who's running for judge? I mean, this is what part of the problem. People know about presidential elections, they know about city council, mayor, governor. But how do we find out who's running for judge?
So there is a resource by the League of Women Voters, national nonpartisan organization, and they put out something called Vote 411, and you can basically preview your ballot online. You type in your address, where you live, and it'll give you a sample ballot that tells you all the people who are up for election and where you live. And I just checked it out the other day. I'll put the link in the chat, but it does tell you all of the judges who were up for either election or retention where you live.
Vote411.org is definitely a great resource. We've been pushing that in the collaborative as well. For any questions that you have about your ballot. So this also brings into question, though, that we need an increase in representation in civic spaces. This is something that I always like to bring up, is that if we have more representation, then maybe we'll see things more in our favor. First of all, do you think it's that simple?
I'll jump in. Personally, I don't always think it's as simple as just representation, because I'll just cut straight to it. The Attorney General in the Breonna Taylor case was black, and he absolutely did not show up for the black community. It's not, you don't need to be a rocket scientist, and they say, and you hear this saying a lot, like if they want to convict a ham sandwich, they'll convict it. And I know this because I've seen cases go to that level for less, and without police officers involved and stuff like that. And so it's not necessarily just about black representation. It absolutely helps, but it's about the person representing the black community, and that could be anybody. Like it could be a white person. It could be like right now, like I feel like we're so blessed to live here in New Mexico, because right now our congressional leaders, they are all people of color. They're Native American and they're Latino, and so it's amazing that we are in a state where that is the case, but it's not like that everywhere. But also on that same basis, I can't say that those congressional leaders here in New Mexico are showing up for black people. I can say to some degree that some of them show up for, the minority that they belong with, but I think that if we have leaders that can collectively understand issues of race and inequality across the different spectrums, and are able to be knowledgeable in that and be experts in their field, then those are the people that we want representing us. Because if it is just another person that looks like you that steps up but isn't the right person for the job, then we are not making any progress.
What do you think about the representation issue? I'm sorry, sorry.
I just think that when we have these people, these leaders, or these people that hold power, we have to make it to be kind of where it's normal for black people to want to be these things. I think we're in an era now that when I was growing up, I used to always say I wanted to be a firefighter. And if that didn't work, I wanted to be a policeman. Now I'm 32 years old, and I probably will never say I want to be a policeman ever again. Because I know what comes with that now. I know how, as being black, police look at us differently. So I wouldn't want to be in that system that can hurt one of my brothers and sisters, because I feel like nowadays we have people that come from money and they come from good upbringings, and they don't really understand people that are coming from the struggle. I think we need to get more people that actually come from the struggle, that change their lives into these positions of power, whether it be judges, police chiefs, mayors, anything like that. Because I feel like we need people that can actually connect with the people. If you've never been there before and never experienced it, it's kind of hard to actually know how to do it. No matter how much schooling you may have done or been around someone or anything like that, once you actually go through it, it's different. And I think that's what it is now. We don't have people in these positions that's actually been through situations or know how it feels to be oppressed or to come from the struggle. And so we have to try to figure out a way to educate our youth, our black youth or minority youth, to try to get them to want to take on these tasks. Because right now, they're afraid. And they're afraid because of what the system holds.
So I see, Sean, you have your hand raised.
I really appreciate what Kay just said, and I like how both Torrance and Tay have been talking about, how we can uplift our black youth and our other youth of color, so that there's an appreciation for these stations, these civic duties, these local duties, civic duties, state level, make politics, actually attractive, because it's holistic again and healthy again, as opposed to sort of the corrosive system that it's ground down to in the last 60 years or even longer. I did just have a little aside. I want to give, I think Kindra was trying to talk a second ago, but I did just want to give a little aside based on what Mason said. Daniel Cameron, it just came out today or yesterday, didn't even present murder charges to the grand jury. So he hobbled the process from the start. That is not the kind of person, whatever color, that you want in that position. He's Mitch McConnell's dude. He's a black Republican. The operative word there is Republican, not black, and he's made his allegiance known. So these are not the youth that Torrance or Tay or Mason are talking about. These are folks who are steeped in the dominant culture, the system and its dominant culture. And, as long as they are favoring that particular point of view and not trying to actually mete out justice, then we're going to see this over and over again. I mean, Cameron literally admitted in the press that Madamy and Cosgrove were justified in their acts and conduct, the two other police. I mean, he just said that flat out. So what's amazing to me is that we can be in the system, see everyone admitting exactly their motivations and why they're doing what they're doing, and yet not see the change. I mean, folks like us on this call, we're the ones trying to affect change. But I mean, talk about needing systemic overhaul. That kind of shows it. I mean, Breonna wasn't going to get justice from the start. Just like Tamir, just like John Crawford, these blatant examples where the cops aren't charged. They were not going to get justice from the start. So that was just my little aside there.
Part of the reason why that is, and just real quick, is that, we have representation there. There are people who look like us, the people who say that they're for us, but they're not put there by us. And so us putting people in place, regardless of what they look like and who they are, us actually putting people in place, judges and city council and all of that, we're not using our power to actually put people in position to look out for us.
How do we use our power?
Voting, knowing, and not just voting, being informed and having an educated vote. You can go out and hit Democrat and let all the D's go all the way down, but if you don't know exactly who you're voting for, it might not always be on the Democratic side. It might always be.
And Kindra, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I think the discussion is super interesting for me. I'm a little bit of a cynic when it comes to relying solely on civic means for radical change, and especially for the Black community in the United States. And so, kind of on your question, Megan, about what does representation look like, even if, the examples that have been stated here, even if we do get someone of color, someone who's Black in these positions, they still might uphold what the system has been designed to do, which is to repress Black people. And so it's kind of an interesting dilemma for me, and how I've found solace is, not just in voting, but also in self-determination with organizing in my own community. I'm kind of in the camp of, I want to abolish police because, even if we've had reforms, they'll find a loophole and a way to get through that reform that was already made. Having cameras on cops can cover it. What are we doing to keep police accountable? And it's very frustrating, I think, for a lot of people when, they might find one good cop in their community, but the system itself, the good cop has to follow the orders of their, whoever is ahead of them, and so on and so forth. And even if you have the attorney general, they are upholding like the United States dominant culture, mindset of Black people are violent, of Black people need to be exploited for labor. To me, it's we have to think of the history and also the contemporary aspect of the United States as a whole empire, and how what we can do. We can vote, but we also just need to think about how do we protect ourselves, aside from the system, because the system as it stands, as it's been created, has not helped us in a lot of different ways. So I just wanted to put that thinking out there for people that chew on.
And we have a question, actually, this is an interesting one, that there was a topic of gangs and law enforcement. How do we address something like that if the law enforcement has, for example, white supremacy within it?
The white supremacy within the police is just a gang inside of a gang. The police are the gang, regardless of what gangs are inside of the police. They put that uniform on, they are a gang because they're going to protect their brothers, just like a street gang. They're going to protect their brothers. So I don't think we need to worry about what's going on inside of the gang. We need to just dismantle the gang or fix the gang. And that's just how it is. This is like with an organization. If you want to take out an organization, who are you going to take out? You're going to take out the leader. So who's the leader? Ultimately, the police department as a whole. So I think that we need to just figure out how to fix the system. I raised my hand just a minute ago in regards to the abolish thing. Made a great point. The system has not worked. So we're all in agreement that the system has not worked. But we have been here for over 400 years. So say we do just say we're gonna just forget that whole system. What are you gonna do? 400 years? Can't just stop. That's one thing. So it's like, again, if it's worked for everyone else, why can't we go in as people and help choose those laws, help fix that system as Black people? Why can't we go and be a voice in fixing those laws so that we know there is no loopholes or there is no extra things that can happen? How can we get more Black Americans involved in the police system? Those are the type of questions that we need to answer when we're trying to figure out how we can fix the police. But just saying, let's get rid of them and wake up the next day, oh man, that's when we're going to go into a civil war between us, each other.
I would just like to say, I don't say gang, I say like a cult-like behavior, because that's what they have adapted in the police system, which is crazy, right? And then the onus of trying to make them come clean has been placed on the community when it should be in the police department. Internal Affairs does nothing for us when we find out that they're hiding information, destroying evidence, or turning off body cams, and we know, and they know about it and won't reveal that to the public. I mean, look at all the information that's coming out now with the Breonna Taylor case. So yes, as Tay said, we do have to integrate that system and break it and dismantle it from the top down. Unfortunately, I like to say now we need to change the narrative, and that we need to get back in the driver's seat, because we have allowed this to get away from us. It was built by design to oppress us. Well, now we need to dismantle that system that oppresses us and make ourselves be seen and heard. And that's at every turn, and in your local and state government and the federal government. The police departments are funded by state and federal money. That's our money. We should have a say in what's going on with our money. If a police officer, like one of the officers in the Breonna Taylor case, botched a no-knock warrant, why would you send that police officer out again on a no-knock warrant? These are the things that we need to be aware of. And so what I would like to see is transparency within the police department, in the local police department. If a police officer has anything on their record, we should be able to pull that up and see it. Because the records of members in the system, you can pull that up and see it. So why can't I pull up a police officer's record and say, oh, he's been involved in hate crimes, or he's had these complaints for bias, for racism? I should be able to see that as a citizen and as a taxpayer putting money in his pocket.
And
So
that kind of brings us back to the point of judges too, where if they're being evaluated, what are they being evaluated on? And how do we know from our end as Black people, is this a judge that I want to re-elect? That's an excellent point. I want to remind people watching this too that you can go ahead and drop comments in the comment section. We are monitoring that, and we'd love to hear from you as well. And I want to go to, we kind of touched on it, but what are the specific barriers that you think that there are that we can address as a public? For example, if we're trying to encourage our children that, you don't just have to be, you can't just, only be a lawyer. You can be a judge, you can be all these things too. What are the barriers that you think prevent people of color from choosing these careers? Or is that the case? Or are they just being stopped on the way? What do you think?
Well, I think sorry, can I go ahead?
Yeah. Sorry.
I think it starts in our school system because let me tell you this: the same counselor that will tell a non-person of color that they can be a judge will tell a young person of color that they can be a teacher. You know what I'm saying? So I think it starts in our school system. We have to encourage our youth, and we have unfortunately we have to take that on ourselves because we're not getting help right now in the education system. So we have to encourage our children, our people of color, that they can go beyond the limitations that are set for their lives.
And I think for me that we have to kind of get away from like the stereotypes or the norm. Me, being from the South, being from nothing, coming from the streets, my way out was sports. But it was like, what am I going to do after sports? So then I never thought about that. That never was asked by anyone but my peers or anything. What are you going to do after sports? So I think we have to just go back to kind of teaching it and making it cool, I guess you would say, that it's okay to be a police. It's okay to be a judge. It's okay to be a lawyer. But I think right now with what's going on in America and being black, it's a stretch to say that our children right now are going to want to actually do that because I see a lot of education going on when it comes to black children these days. We're just teaching our kids to kind of stay away and be afraid of police. So if we're telling our kids to stay away and be afraid of police, they're not going to want to go be a police. So we have to talk about, I guess, kind of the good to let them know, hey, you can be a hero if you're a police too. Or you can be a celebrity or a star or be on TV if you're a police too, for good things, just as well as if you're on TV for winning an NBA championship or NFL championship. So I think we got to just kind of fix the narrative. But right now, with the times that we're in, it's going to be hard to do.
And we do need to utilize like local programs that are available. I know here in Rio Rancho, there's a Coffee with a Cop program. So, I do plan on even taking my child there. Take your child to the police station. Take them there. Let them see them. Ask them to meet and interact with police officers so that we can get rid of them being afraid right now. I know, with the time, it's really hard to for our children and our youth to overcome that, but we have to start somewhere. And that's the only way I know to start.
Are Dare and Great still a thing? Do those programs still exist? Dare and Great, the programs where the police will come to the schools and you can see the Corvette and they bring the helicopter out. Like, what happened to that? We used to have that. Like, that's legit. Look at the Corvette with the police in it.
We can show up at the school.
Well, even before then, we could. I was wondering, is it still around having that relationship with the police and the schools? Now you have actual school police as opposed to the guys who come by and hand out suckers and stuff like that are used to.
Well, and in terms of like representation and why we don't have more people of color in these positions of power and in elected office, we can't forget about the overwhelming influence of money in our elections and who is actually influencing who gets to be in those seats. When we have elections that are running up tabs that are insanely pricey, I mean, not just in New Mexico, but, all across the country. Some judicial races are raking in, millions of dollars for people who are running for office at the highest levels of our courts. And when, money is so influencing in our elections, like who else has the ability to finance and run for an elected position if you don't have the ability to raise thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in order to actually have a competitive shot at being elected in office? And that's another problem that we see and why there's such a lack of not just, racial and ethnic diversity on any of our elected positions, but, economic and different people who actually come from other backgrounds. Like, when you have to finance your races, we're only looking at people who can afford to finance those races, which are the people who make the most money, attorneys, bankers, people who work in agricultural or in oil and gas fields. Like, we don't have as many teachers or, just people from normal walks of life running for office because it's too difficult for them to raise money and compete with special interests and money that want to influence not only who is representing our communities at the statewide level, but in our city council, on our school boards, and in our corporates.
Yeah, and I like to go after that because that was so well said. And I think just to follow with talking about barriers to being in these positions as far as money, like we as Black people have probably all had that moment where we had like a friend or somebody whose upbringing was a little bit different than us in terms of like wealth or things that they did have that a lot of Black people don't have. And unfortunately, this is pretty common that, you know, African Americans or people of color live probably below the poverty line or the median American household income. And so when it comes to wanting to achieve these things, like it's not only just I don't have money to run for this election, it's like I have to get a job in order to help my mom put food on the table. I have to do this in order to put myself through college so I can be the first person in my family to go to college. It's I need to, you know, play basketball or I need to play football because I've been giving this athletic gift and the teachers don't believe in me because I don't score as well on the test. And I know from personal experience, you know, I was lucky enough to grow up with a 2-parent household that actually did pretty well. I grew up in Rio Rancho, in Cabazon, which is a pretty good community. And that did not stop the police from stopping me at 13 years old in my own neighborhood, pulling me over for walking at the street at night, handcuffing me, and all of these things that I had absolutely no control over. So the biggest barrier was just the color of my skin. And so, and at times like that, you know, I may have had aspirations to be a police officer or even a firefighter. I have family members who are both. But when an experience like that happens, or your life experience changes, and you're aware that it's like this because of the color of your skin, it makes it a lot harder to decide, you know, this is what I'm going to do. Because as we get older, it starts becoming more about, you know, what am I going to do for myself to survive, to provide for myself, to provide for my family, before you can decide, you know, what can I do to fix these issues in my community. And a lot of times like, look at all of us on this call right now. We all want to fix the issues in our community, but it wasn't like we may have had this idea from, you know, from high school age till now. You know, there's a lot of things that happen between now and then. And so what I hope for the future is that as these things become more and more known about the issues and, you know, the breaks in our system, that young people at a younger age will be able to educate themselves specifically on that. And so no matter, they know that, like, you know, if they get pulled over, it's not the end of the world. It's not, you know, this is just who I am. This is what my life is going to be. It's no, I can actually start now to make a change, so this isn't going to be the future for somebody else.
We have a couple questions coming in about accountability in the police department, such as if Bernalillo County Sheriff were to refuse to have deputies wear body cameras, and then we see numbers of unjustified shootings, how do we hold him accountable for that, where we know that body cameras are necessary for our well-being and for their well-being? So how do we combat something like that, and also holding other members of our local government accountable for such things that don't benefit us at all?
I have a quick answer as far as specifically our BCSO. I mean, the head of the BCSO is stumping for, you know, for the cause. So that again is sort of I think Sydney or Barb or someone correct me, but I mean, I think that's just something to elect a better official next time. Because the BCSO is just still any kind of reform attempts. It's a totally valid question. It's just tough when literally a whole force of people who have, you know, lethal force at their fingertips can't be held accountable. When specifically right now, we are all on this call, not only because of the elections coming on, but because of this huge movement, Black Lives Matter, and everything that you know aims to all the reforms inherent in that. You know, not only Black Lives, but all people here at DOC. But for me, that's frightening. And it's frustrating to know that there are this whole needs of people who are supposed to be protecting us, who themselves are running under the operating principle that it really doesn't matter, and they have basically a superiority complex and refuse to be held accountable. So I don't have an answer. I'm just stating that that's frightening, and that's part of maybe where if you can marry some of Kindra's, flip the table, and really change the system versus, not versus, but consider part of that argument with Tay or Barb's argument, where you're in the system and trying to change it from within. Because where I come from, I mean, I as an African American, as Black American, as a Catholic, I mean, those are two places in my life where I know that I have to work within. I'm not leaving. I'm not flying to Europe. I'm not flying to Canada. I'm not going to go to Barbados. Which some community members are touting. They're just like, forget it. We're gonna be like 1930s and Pan African. We're just gonna get out of here. No, this is my home, and my ancestors built this country for free. So I'm going to stay here and try to work from within the system to then change the system, just like I might in the church, just like I might, as a Black American in a capitalist democratic system, which doesn't have my best interests in mind. So big, long tangent, not a specific answer, but I definitely feel everybody's sort of nuances about, ooh, this is systemic. Like we're looking at cultural and systemic shifts, and it's hard. That's why we're all talking.
We gotta take politics out of everything. Honestly, we gotta, I guess, just start looking at it from right and wrong. When you start talking about red and blue, it's just like you talking about red and blue in the streets.
It's kind of Kindra too, because she has a different perspective on this that isn't necessarily politics. What would you say?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I agree. This is definitely not a red and blue issue. This issue is a matter of, we have the system that we're in, and if, accountability measures only go but so far because of the system, because, police uphold the state, police uphold the virtues of the state, like criminalization as an entity in the United States is built around money. And it's just all these things need to be, in my opinion, very completely dismantled. And kind of the question that I've heard come up a lot is, what do we replace it with? And I think that, that takes some forward thinking, some organizing, and also like just being inward and also thinking of our future as Black people and the ITOC. What does that look like? How can we determine for ourselves what a world would look like without police, without policing our bodies, without taking away our autonomy, whether that be toward, like in front of a judge or in a prison. I envision a world where I don't want my son, daughter, friend to just go off to prison forever, even if the crime, if the crime they committed was wrong. Like, what does it say if I know my tax dollars are going towards, the policing of Black bodies every day, and a lot of it is unjustified, And so, yeah, I agree. It's not a blue and red issue. Whether we have a Democrat or Republican party, we're still going to be talking about these issues. And, I think I will say maybe reform and also defund policing, that can be an avenue towards abolishment. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to do, but I think we also just need to think about, what world do we envision without this system? What can we do to replace the system that we have so it works for everybody and money is out of it? The money that we do have goes towards our community, goes towards our neighbors and our livelihood, instead of, just the state upholding a system that doesn't work.
Well,
I think one of the things that we should do is, first off, is start to actually be realistic with expectations and what we're actually asking. I completely agree with Sean is that there is no immediate answer to right now. There is no way for us to wake up tomorrow and say, hey, we're changing the system. This is something that I can personally firsthand do and go out and make the change that needs to be done, or to hold somebody accountable. We're too far behind the eight ball. I mean, these things are deeply ingrained into the system and the people who are in the system. At this point, we have to start planning and looking forward to what can we do to start to affect that change, to get into the system and to make those stuff, the things that we feel that matter, how to address those. Looking at it as a, hey, what can I personally do, me by myself, and wake up tomorrow and do? I mean, realistically, there's nothing any of us can do. We don't have that kind of power. But we can plan and organize and sit and talk with other people who don't have that power and figure out how we can put somebody in place who does have that power. But there, take the next step and put more people in power and in place to get what we want.
Well, I would like to add something that my brother Tay says often. And if, like, the question was, if the Bernalillo County Police they don't wear their body cams, and we know that they're doing a lot of injustice issues, my brother Tay likes to say, take it to the streets. And I think that's when we literally have to take it to the streets. And we have to protest every day and demand that change that we need, demand the resignation of the police chief, because we are powerful as a unit and together. And so when we start banding together and we show that unity and that togetherness, then we can demand change. So that's what I will say is our interim answer until we can integrate higher levels of government, and so we can dismantle the system from the top down.
And I think to add on to what you're saying, like what Barb said, yeah, I love to say, take it to the streets. As Barb knows, Torrance knows, anytime something happens, I'm ready. Let's go. Like, that's how I am. And I think that's where we are in the time now. Like, we have to take the aggressive approach with things. We have to start knocking on doors that we usually wouldn't knock on, and we have to stand there and face them. And I think that's kind of what we are in this time that's different from before, is people were a little bit more kind of standoffish in their approach, and we're kind of the aggressive type. We're going to go and we're going to knock at your door. We're going to ask you why, or can we have a seat and talk to try to make real change, because until we get into those rooms and those spaces and have those real conversations, nothing's going to change. And it's not going to change overnight. That's one thing that's not going to happen. Things are going to change slowly, but we got to we got to be realistic, and we got to be honest about this. Everything has not changed, but some things have got better. There are some situations that have got, I guess, kind of talked about. And what can we do different? Some officers now, not all, but some officers now have been held accountable for some things that they're still holes, or they have not. But that's where we got to come in and get into those rooms and those spaces and change the narrative and change the laws and rules that are out there. If we're not going to be willing to go out there and put our body on the line to get those changes, we're just going to keep having the same conversations, and our children are going to be having the same conversations.
And
go ahead, Sean.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say I love what you guys do, and getting to know you more and more, the more often you get out and the more often, Truth to Power and all these other groups have been joining you. And I do think it's important because I hear a little bit, it's not a pushback, but, there's concern like, well, what next after the rally? But you know what? That rally and that march and that protest and those speeches and those different voices being heard, there is an aggregate effect. And in a way, I look at it, y'all may think I'm crazy, but in a way, George Floyd and the pandemic and our ecological disasters and, and now our economic, all of these four crises coming together at once, in a way that the tiny silver lining, which is not so tiny because it speaks to what Tay is talking about, what Barb's talking about, is that the focus is on these systemic issues now. The focus is on why is the earth burning down? Why are our politics burning down? Why are people getting killed in the streets? And why, do we have this leadership who can't manage a pandemic properly? And more people are dying as a result of that. And so I think because we all had to pause since March, since February, March, we might not all be sitting here. So thank God, we might not all be sitting here having these discussions. And somebody else, another Breonna, another Trayvon or somebody may have been killed, but we're all busy with our lives. But thankfully, this particularly this particular era has brought us all together to finally go, oh, we need to work on this. And so I'm 100% down that, the performative aspects, usually you hear performative as a negative now from some liberal voice boxes. But the performative part of it is important because now they see us on the news. Now they know it's their mothers and sisters and daughters and brothers and fathers and uncles out there in the streets going, no more. So it's important. So I'm with you on that for sure.
And the thing is too, like you said, people are saying, why are we doing these protests? When honestly, these protests have brought us a lot of conversation. I'm not going to really say who or anything like that, but we have a conversation coming up with someone very powerful in the city, like very powerful in the city. And I promised them I wasn't going to put it out there or anything because it's not about the media. But my team know I don't really like reaching out to people or even being on the phone with them. But when we do get those chances to actually sit there and have a conversation that can get us somewhere, we're going to have those conversations. And I think by us being in the streets and going to these different places, we went to a crime scene, a murder scene, right after someone got murdered. We went there to make sure the police did their job. And you know what Manny said? I didn't come out and talk because it was a smoky out. Out of all the days that you don't come out, you come out the day that we come out, it's excuses. But again, we're out there. We're going to continue to be out there. We're going to continue to ask people to join us because they open up doors that we're not open before.
And this ties perfectly not only into representation, but one of our comments which mentioned, what about getting on boards and commissions to advise the city, the county, and state governments? And a lot of times when you see people like us marching in the streets, when you see all these people gathered, you kind of do think about that. What if these were the same people that were in the spaces advising the city, advising our state, the county? What do you think about that?
We actually had that question come up. We did a podcast overnight and someone called in and asked me, like, how would you guys feel about getting like city council seats or, mayor later on down the road? And I'm more about the people. I like to be out there with the people, like right there, dead smack in the middle with the people. And me being a leader, it's hard because I kind of conduct myself at times like I'm the people, but there's so much emotion and feeling behind it that I think I can do more without being in the city council seat. But I think I can help my brothers and sisters get to that seat, right? And we can continue to build and have conversation, and they'll be hearing from me as well while they're in that seat. But me, I feel like I don't serve a purpose. I'm not necessarily a purpose, but I wouldn't be able to do the job that could be done by someone else that's more equipped. Me, I'd rather go out and talk to the people and see how you're doing, see how they do. Go back and tell the message to you that these people are feeling this type of way, or I was there with them when this happened. And then I'll let you get into the politics of it and, the big names and stuff. I'll let you handle that because you serve a better purpose in that seat than I do. And I think that's kind of how it is with organizations. Everybody needs to know their role and what they can do. Because when you got people that start to do too much or talk about things that they don't know, it creates a bigger problem.
I've been saying since we first started is the goal isn't for one of us to make it to one of those seats. It's to build the pipeline from the streets to the seats. And we're on the streets. We're able to be out there with the people, know exactly what's going on. But we also have the ear and connection by putting people in place and by actually having conversations of this is what's going on out here. This is what we see. This is what needs to be done. How can that affect, or what can you do to make that happen? And pass that up and pass it to the next level. So it's not necessarily about the individual being out there. It's about the message and the needs of people to pick it up.
And I'm a believer in doing both. I'm a believer in doing both. I'm going to hit the streets with you, and then when I get home, I'm going to make the phone calls and do the email. And I think as a local community, as people of color, if we have someone that's interested in, in serving, they feel like they're that committed to their civic duty, that they want to serve on a board, commissions, or that, we need to back them all the way. We need to support that person because we're living in a world where the politicians and the leaders that we have here were groomed to be in those positions. So we need to start grooming our own people of color so that they can obtain those positions as well. So when we join together, of course, I'm about strength in numbers and unity and being a community. When we join together and we have one of our youth or young adults who is expressing interest in being on a board or serving in local government, we need to back them all the way. And I think us just having this dialogue and letting people know that these different organizations are out here is a start for that.
I think that's
Sorry,
something. Oh, go ahead, Sydney. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to piggyback on top of what Barb is saying, like, most boards and commissions are appointed, especially at the local level. So when we know that there is a person of color or someone from our community who wants to be part of those boards and commissions, we need to call everybody that we know and start having them fill those offices with letters and calls about why we should be appointing these people to be part of these commissions, because that's how we can help use our influence to make sure we do have representation in those areas.
Are you gonna put in there, Sean?
I just, we were talking about it earlier about representation and the ballot, and that's why when you both were talking about, is it vote 411 or 411 vote?
Vote411.org.
Yeah, I mean, that blew me away. I thought that was the tech is at our fingertips, right? I mean, maybe we don't read the same newspapers or watch the same news or whatever, but the tech is there, and the down ticket, items are crucial. It's like what Sydney's talking about, the education boards and, the smaller roles. Everybody's got a role, but I mean, that person who starts out on, some APS position 1 year could go for mayor the next, could go for state rep the next, could be at the national level the next. And we can be a part of, and I think all the work that you all on the call are doing inspires, folks to go ahead and pursue that political route. And so I think that's great. But it can just start. That's why you have to look at the whole ballot. I think Torrance, as somebody earlier said, don't just worry about the D's, the R's. Like, get to know these folks, do your research, and make an educated. That may be a great independent, that you want to throw your weight behind. But regardless, it's important to know who you're voting for in the place.
And that's why another thing that the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative likes to push is making an educated vote. So when you have a website like vote4one.org, and if you have an absentee ballot, you can sit in your house on a Saturday and maybe instead of binging Netflix for a few hours, it might not be as exciting, but you start researching your ballot and filling that out there. And we also have a beautiful comment that I want to share, that someone mentioned that their impressionable young son loves to take in the words and poetry and loving kindness from the marches and the street from the Black New Mexico movement. So I wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And just thank you for being here, really. This is beautiful, and we'll be doing more of these, so I want to let people know to stay tuned for the New Mexico Black Voters Collaborative Facebook page, because we're going to continue having these open discussions, having these roundtables, and inviting public questions and comments. And I also want to take some time to thank our sponsors, such as Romeo County Clerk Linda Stover, Secretary of State Maggie Toulouse Oliver, Common Cause New Mexico Black Leadership Council, the Office of African American Affairs, the African American Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce. We have so many supporters who have helped make this possible. So I want to thank them and thank all of you for being here today with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting this.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, goodbye everyone, but as I mentioned, please stay tuned for our next event. We'll be posting that very soon.